The scent of liniment and unwashed wool always brings me back to that kitchen. It was November, the kind of sharp, bruising cold that gets into your teeth before you even step off the porch. I was standing by the wood stove, the iron handle burning hot through the fabric of my dish towel, watching a single bead of melted snow slide down the heavy black wool of Bishop Eli's coat. It pooled on our scrubbed pine floor, right between his heavy leather boots and the hem of Ruth's dark blue apron. Nobody was speaking. In an Amish kitchen, silence isn't just the absence of noise. It has a weight, a texture, like wet flannel pressing against your mouth. Isaac wouldn't look at me. He stood by the wood box, a piece of split hickory gripped in his hands so tight, his knuckles were white as lard. My sister-in-law, Ruth, was just 19 then, the same age as me, but she looked like a winter branch ready to snap under the ice. She was staring fixedly at a knot in the floorboards, her thumbs tucked tightly into her apron strings, her breath coming in shallow. Ragged puffs that you could almost see in the chilly corners of the room. That was the exact second. The floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet. I was a newlywed, barely 3 months into my marriage to Isaac, still trying to learn the specific creaks of this house, the way the wind rattled the pantry latch, the exact amount of wood it took to keep the oven even. I was supposed to be a wife building a home. Instead, I felt like a ghost haunting someone else's secret. We had been sharing our bedroom, the tiny sloped siling room under the eaves, with Ruth for 6 weeks. Not because she was sick. Not because the house downstairs lacked space. But because of an unspoken order that seemed to hang over our roof like a low, gray cloud. When Bishop Eli cleared his throat, the sound was dry, like dead leaves scraping across gravel. He didn't look at me either. He looked only at Isaac, and that's when I knew that the life I thought I was stepping into didn't exist at all. The truth was something entirely different, something heavy and old, and it had been waiting for me long before I ever said my vows. My name is Anna. Back then, hearing that name in Isaac's house still felt strange, like putting on a pair of shoes that belonged to someone else. I had spent my girlhood in a district 3 miles north, where the rules were the same, but the faces were familiar. Now, I was a stranger in a house where the walls seemed to hold their breath. Have you ever lived in a place where you could feel a secret vibrating in the air, but everyone around you acted like the sky was perfectly blue? It makes you doubt your own eyes. It makes you feel small. If you know that heavy, suffocating feeling of ignoring your own instincts just to keep the peace, tell me about it in the comments below. And if you want to understand the deep, hidden currents that run through our communities, the stories that never make it past the church bench, hit the subscribe button now. This is only the very beginning of what we carried in that quiet house under the hill. Before that morning by the stove, I had tried to wrap my mind around Ruth's sadness. It was a tangible thing in our house, thick as molasses. Just 5 months before my wedding, Ruth had been courted by a boy named David from the Western District. He was a carpenter, a lad with quick hands, and a laugh that you could hear across a hayfield. Everyone knew they were bound for the fall weddings. The church elders had nodded, the mothers had looked over linens, and then, between a Tuesday and a Thursday, David was gone. His tools were left in his father's shop. His buggy remained in the barn. The older folks said he'd gone English, that the worldly spirit had caught him like a fever. But Ruth didn't grieve like a girl whose sweetheart had run off to the neon lights. She grieved like someone who had been hollowed out with a knife. She would sit by the upper window for hours. Her needle poised over a piece of plain mending, her eyes fixed on the bend in the road where the creek met the willow trees. She wouldn't eat the lard bread I made. She wouldn't join the other girls for the Sunday evening singings. When I asked Isaac about it in the privacy of our bed, the large 4-poster that his grandfather had built, he would turn his back to me, the straw ticking of the mattress groaning under his weight. "It's church business, Anna," he'd whisper into the dark, his voice flat, devoid of the warmth he usually had when we spoke about the farm. "It's not for us to untangle." But how could I not try to untangle it when her extra cot sat 3 feet from our own? How could I build a life with a man when every night we could hear his sister's breath catching in the dark. A small, rhythmic hitch that sounded exactly like a creature caught in a snare. To understand how that cot ended up beside our window, you have to understand the rule of our district. In Bishop Elisai territory, a girl who lost her suitor under a cloud of shame was considered vulnerable, a stray sheep needing a watchful eye. Her father had decreed that she shouldn't sleep downstairs near the kitchen doors, where a restless girl might slip out into the night. And so, because Isaac was her brother and newly married, his house was chosen as her sanctuary, or her cage. I remember the first week she moved in, the air smelled constantly of cedar from her small wooden chest and the starch on her white prayer coverings. I did what I was raised to do. I nodded, I kept my eyes on my plate, and I passed the butter. Outwardly, I was the dutiful Amish wife, stepping softly around the edges of family business. But inside, every time I adjusted my own bonnet in the mirror, my reflection looked like a stranger's. I was 19, full of a fierce, unspoken hunger to know the man I had married. Yet our room was occupied by a shadow. The turning point came on a Tuesday in late December. The wind was howling off the ridge, throwing dry snow against the window panes, with a sound like throwing rice. We were sitting at the kitchen table shelling dried lebo beans. The rhythmic plip-plop of the beans hitting the tin basin was the only sound in the house. Isaac was at the barn fixing a broken harness. I looked at Ruth. Her fingers were raw from the cold well water, her knuckles cracked. "Ruth," I said, my voice barely louder than the wind. "The bishop's buggy was seen down by the mill yesterday. Your father was with him." She didn't stop her hands. Plip, plop. "They have much to discuss before the spring thaws," she whispered. Her voice was too thin, like paper held up to a candle. "Are they discussing David?" I asked, pushing the boundary further than I ever had. Ruth's thumb froze on a pod. She didn't look up, but I saw the tendon in her neck go tight as a wire. "David is gone, Anna. The church has closed the book." "But you haven't," I said. She finally looked at me, and her eyes weren't sad anymore. They were terrified. "You shouldn't open books that are sealed, sister. Sometimes the ink stains everything it touches." Before I could answer, the back door groaned open, stomping boots breaking the tension. Isaac walked in, smelling of horse sweat and freezing leather, bringing the cold air with him. He looked between the two of us, his eyes lingering on the frozen bean pods in Ruth's lap. He knew we had been speaking, and the familiar, dark curtain of his discomfort fell instantly across his face. That night, the silence in our bedroom was different. It didn't feel like peace. It felt like a fuse burning down in the dark. I lay beneath the heavy quilts, my back to the wall, listening. Ruth was on her side, facing the frost-rimed window. The room was so cold our breath pooled above us in faint mists. Then the weeping began. It wasn't the loud, dramatic crying of a girl throwing a tantrum. It was a suffocating, choked sound, her face buried deep into her cornhusk pillow to stifle the noise. Every muscle in my body went rigid. I stared at the dark rafters, my heart hammering against my ribs. Through the thin wall of her fingers, a ragged whisper broke through the dark. "Please, don't make me. Dear Lord, please don't make me." I reached out under the covers and touched Isaac's shoulder. His skin was warm, but the moment my fingers brushed his arm, I realized he was already awake. He was lying perfectly still, staring straight up into the blackness, his jaw clamped so tight I could hear the faint grinding of his teeth. He heard her. He had heard her before. I pulled my hand back, feeling a sudden icy chasm open up right there in the middle of our bed. Outwardly, I remained still, pretending to drift back to sleep when the crying finally stopped. But inside, I was mapping out a battlefield. My husband was hiding something from me. His sister was begging God for mercy in the dark, and the bishop's shadow was lengthening over the snow outside our door. By January, the snow was drifted up to the windowsills, and the air inside the kitchen tasted of wood smoke and old cabbage. It was during the great thaw a few weeks later that the hidden gears of the community finally ground into the light. I was at the communal quilting bee at Aunt Martha's house. 30 women jammed into one room, the air thick with the smell of damp wool cloaks, drying near the stove and the sharp scent of peppermint tea. Ruth sat 3 chairs away from me, her head bowed over a lone star pattern, her needle moving with a frantic, mechanical precision. Old Sarah, a woman whose skin looked like dried apples and who had buried 2 husbands in the churchyard, leaned over my frame to check my stitches. Her hand was heavy on my shoulder, smelling faintly of lye soap. She watched Ruth for a long time, then spat a loose thread from her lip. "An old orchard doesn't grow straight if you fence it too tight, Anna," Sarah whispered, her voice a low rustle that didn't carry past our corner of the quilt. "Sometimes the elders think they are digging a well to save a family, but they are only digging a ditch to bury the truth." That phrase, digging a ditch to bury the truth, stayed in my chest like a cold stone. Looking back now, across 20 years of life outside that district, I see the tragic friction of that winter so clearly. Bishop Eli and my father-in-law weren't monsters from a storybook. They didn't wake up wishing to destroy Ruth. In their minds, they were carrying out a sacred duty. They were protecting a fragile family name, fulfilling an ancient promise, and keeping the order of the church intact. They genuinely believed that by bending Ruth's will, they were saving her soul from the chaotic world that David had escaped into. But the emotional price of that protection was paid entirely in the currency of a 19-year-old girl's spirit. Everyone else saw a beautiful, quiet sacrifice, a daughter obeying the holy structure of the lineage. I was the only one who saw the cost in the morning light. The gray tint under her skin, the way her hands trembled when she reached for the breadbasket, and the absolute hollow emptiness in her voice when she said the morning prayers. The community was buying its peace and holy reputation with the slow, deliberate crushing of Ruth's life, and my husband was standing guard at the door to make sure the transaction went through without a sound. Today, I live nearly 400 miles away from that valley. My kitchen smells of fresh ground coffee and citrus oil now, not wood smoke and lye, and the windows look out over an open meadow rather than a closed-in ridge. Ruth lives in a neighboring state, sharing a quiet frame house with an older widow. She never married Jonas Miller, and she never married anyone else. When I see her now during our rare quiet visits, her smile is real, but it is a quiet thing that sits behind her eyes, a survivor's smile. Isaac and I spent years rebuilding our marriage from the foundation up. We had to learn that a home cannot stand on a bedrock of holy secrets and forced compliance. It took a long time for me to look at him without seeing the quiet boy who sat by the woodbox while his sister broke in the dark. What I know now, with the weight of years behind me, is that the most dangerous cages are always built by the people who claim they are trying to keep you safe. Bishop Eli thought he was saving a family. Instead, he nearly broke a daughter. When we mistake control for care and obedience for love, we don't protect the people we love. We only bury them alive while they are still breathing. The right decision made too late can stop a tragedy, but it still leaves deep, permanent scars across a life. Have you ever had to stand up against the people who claimed they were acting in your best interest, just to save your own soul? Have you ever seen a family secret masquerade as protection, until it nearly destroyed someone you care about? Tell me your story in the comments below. Your words carry more weight than you know. And if these true narratives of hidden lives and deep choices touch your heart, subscribe now for weekly stories. Let's keep searching for the truth together, out in the open light.